Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. With us tonight, whilst Chewy is away on fringe festival duties, is Clint Smith. Clint, welcome to the party.
Thank you for having me, mate.
Oh, it's lovely to have you back on board. You know, it's great. I'm really excited to have you on board tonight because we do want to talk about later on in the show. We'll keep our powder dry. Do want to talk about what's happening with the Greens and that. And because you have been someone who has been in the room where it happened, as Hamilton would say, with Jacinda Ardern as a strategist, what would they be saying in the Greens with this kind of horror stuff? But just hold that one. Yeah. But we're gonna.
All right, I'll hold it.
I'm very excited to have you on to have a chat a bit about. In fact, there's quite a bit going on tonight. We're going to talk about Winston Peters and his, who knows what we call it, and the response from Mr. Luxon. And again, I'm probably going to call on you for what would be happening in that room with Luxon. Luxon does look like he's being led around by the nose by both Peters and Seymour most of the time. But he kind of made a I'm going to talk to him comment today, which is for him. You know, a bit stronger.
Maybe it's as strong as it gets.
I mean, for him, you know, it's a little bit stronger than usual. And people know that we love watching.
Comments.
Say again?
At least he'd heard the comments this time. Most of the time he says, I haven't heard that comment.
He actually said in the meeting, I haven't spoken to him yet. And I thought he'd said, I haven't seen that yet. And I was going to bring up a clip that I've used 2 or 3 times of him saying it every time one of his co-leaders in crime, in coalition, has said that. But also we're fans here of Jack Tame's work. And we're going to have a look at a couple of clips tonight from Dr. Shane Reti. Now, again, be interesting. Actually, I'll ask you this now anyway. Be interested to get your take on this. Sure. When Christopher Bishop was on Q&A, he answered questions. And I thought it was pretty good. Now, I didn't like his answers, and he maybe didn't satisfy with the answers, but he answered questions. I feel a bit the same with Dr. Reti this weekend. Like, Jack Tame asks him about how many people are going to die, and he answers the question. And it's interesting. I'm interested to know, because you know when Luxon doesn't answer a question, he just gets a talking point out. He seems to be the master at that. Excuse me for a second. Nala, go get on your mat, mate. Go and lie down. My dog just wandering around the studio. Lie down. Good girl. Stay there. What happens behind the scenes when you go, you're sitting with a leader of the country and you go, these questions are going to come up today. How do you find the balance between ignoring it altogether and answering it? Like, let's not keep that powder dry. Let's ask you now, seeing you have obviously been in that meeting.
Yeah. Well, look, you do what we used to call black hat, you know, like the old cowboy movies, right? The black hat was the bad guy. Yep. And so you pretend that you're, what's the worst question that they could ask you? And you really think it through. And you've got to have proper answers, because otherwise you're going to have these disastrous interviews. And, you know, Luxon's done a few, but I mean, we all remember former Labour leaders doing it as well, where they just get off the hook. And there's a limit to what you can do as an advisor or a staffer. All you can do is make sure you've thought of what those hard questions are going to be, and that you've tried to provide the leader with good answers. But sometimes they just don't want to say, you know, and it's also harder, like, you're trying to defend the indefensible. If you're trying to say ridiculous things like when you give a landlord a tax cut that makes rents go down, you know, like they kind of naturally end up going back to just these rote talking points because
because
you can't
that's the
really
one
ground
that's the
them.
one that happened. That happened last week on a breakfast show. I think it was Anna Burns Francis said, "So Mr. Luxon, $800 million missing in the plan for deductibilities," and his answer was, "Yep, Anna, we're just trying to get rid of $170 a week that's been put on by the last." Like completely missed it, and I'm. Do you as a strategist go, "Oh, fuck," when that kind of things happen, or do you just have to kind of go, "Okay, the leader's chosen to go down a path. I will bite my tongue." What do you do?
In the privacy of your own room, you go, "Oh." It's when you get a leader, like when Jacinda became leader of Labour, and she was just so good and so authentic, and as an advisor, that's such a relief because she's going to speak from her heart, and it's going to be, and she's going to be knowledgeable. So it's not just going to be rote lines. And that's the thing. I mean, fundamentally, it comes actually back to having good policies because you don't have to resort to bullshit lines. If you've got good, you can talk with some depth if there's actual depth behind your policies.
Yeah.
But if you're just, coming up with this garbage about why you're giving landlords $2.9 billion, then it's going to sound like garbage.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Okay, let's. Speaking from the heart, I want to share something that's not on any of the run sheets. An Irish from my land, Ireland, Claire Daly has made a bit of news over the weekend with a speech that she made in Irish Parliament. If you haven't seen this and you're a bit nervous about what's going on in Gaza, you will love it. If you're a fan of how Israel's handling it, you might not like it as much. I just want to play this for you. It's 1 minute and 11 seconds, and it makes me proud to be Irish. Have a listen. When it decides to start. It's coming. This is the build-up. It's tense. It's getting tenser. Come on, Claire. Don't do this to me. It's getting tenser. And I know everyone's going, we can't hear it yet because it hasn't come yet. Let's just try again. There it's going.
Inflicted, Israel is losing on the ground and in the court of public opinion. There's no way that this ends that doesn't leave Israel a pariah state with occupation and apartheid on borrowed time, and they know it. So they're doing everything they can. Desperate acts of aggression to provoke a wider conflict with Lebanon, with Iran, with anybody, to draw in the US, to save them from the consequences of their own actions. And as Yemen shows, Butcher Biden is reporting for duty. With Europe's proud genocide by his side, they are the ones who have enabled the continuation of Israeli terror. Without them, it would already be over. So take note, Butcher Biden. The ancestors of the Ireland that you claim to be from disown you. Keep our country out of your mouth. And as for von der Leyen and genocidal Germany, with your words and deeds supporting Israel in the ICJ, not in our name. The people of Europe stand with Palestine and with South Africa.
Does anyone unaware on where she stands, Clint? I just saw that today. I just wanted to play it. And I love the keep the name of our country out of your mouth. It's just, it's very nice.
And the fact that, South Africa and Ireland are leading on this because they know what apartheid is. They know what these genocidal and racist regimes are. And they I'm Irish too. Well, my mum's Irish, so it makes me proud too.
Yeah, no, it gets me going. This is not necessarily a good thing for some people, but my mum was born in New Zealand, but her parents were both born in Northern Ireland, Catholic roots. So it was the Orangemen, and it's been a part of the history and the story is told. My grandmother was born on the Falls Road, and if anyone knows the Troubles, the Falls Road is the centre of the Troubles. My grandfather was born in Rosslea, and they came across, I think, between World War I and World War II, like in the 1930s on a boat. Mum was born here in 1941. So yeah, Mum was fully Irish once removed, so I'm half Irish twice removed, and stories of it flowed through our family. So that does make me very, very proud. This is a little tangent now. This is smooth. Something else that makes me proud, thanks to you lovely people, is we crossed over 7,000 subscribers in the weekend. So we put that out there. Yeah, it's pretty cool, guys. So thank you very much for being a part of what we're doing. So that's just our YouTube only channel. Like we've got 13,500, I think, on TikTok and all that. But so thank you for being a part of what we're doing. Thank you for being involved. And I can see that Peter wants to thank us by chucking us a $2 super chat. Oh, bless. Yeah, so it's really, really good. And we're going to openly say this. I've never said this before about YouTube followers. 10,000 by June 30th. Is what we're aiming for. 10,000 by June 30th. We've been averaging between 900 and 1,000 a month. That may not stay, on the same path. We don't know, but that's going to be our target. 10,000 by June 30th. If you're not subscribed yet, now would be a great time to do it. Right. Another thing we want to say thanks to is, of course, a huge thanks to all of our patrons, lovely, lovely patrons who help us do what we're doing, and the lovely Clint Smith is right here. See down here? Clint Smith is not only a friend of the show to do chatty chats with us, but also decided to be a patron. So all you people are beautiful. Adriana became a patron over the weekend. And I thought if it's okay with you, Clint, because, I could say thanks for the help. We have a video card that goes out on the computer and it costs $600 to replace. These are the people that help us kind of pay for it, pay for the internet and the system that you're watching it. They all contribute and they help us out lots. But seeing you are a patron, maybe I could call on you and just say, why don't you tell the punters why you decided to be a patron for what we do?
Well, I just like watching your show, and I think you're really getting a great message out there. Back in the day, I used to write on The Standard, right back when it started up, back when it was all pseudonyms and things like that. And, I kind of see what you're doing as a bit of the next generation of that. We were trying to fight in a world where the big political blog was Kiwi blog. And, you're taking on the well-funded media of the right, and I think it's great. So, proud to support it.
Well, thank you very much. And for your other patrons, thank you very much. Everyone who gets involved that way. Remember, the other way you can get involved is just to hashtag share our shit. Also, subscribe to what we're doing. Tell people about us. It's gratifying to hear when I speak to friends of mine, them going, oh, yeah, a mate of mine was talking about you guys the other day, and they didn't even know that I knew you. So it's kind of coming up in conversation, and it's kind of a strange dichotomy because I'm not doing this to grow profile for me or Chewy, but we also know that growing profile of the show means it's reaching further. So, and we all do that together. And the last thing is, for people who bought merch in that first week of the last month, it's all been dropped today except for one little balls up that I made, but I've been in contact with that person. If you bought merch last week, so that was in the second week, it's at the printers right now and it will be coming out to you. And you'll be very happy to hear, punters, that I've got in touch finally with the people who print the mugs. So we'll get some BHN mugs on the way because everyone's asking for them over and over and over again. Right. Now, as you also know, team, I'm pretty bad with the chat. Chewy normally looks after that. I will do my best to keep an eye on it. I want to keep you guys up to date with exactly what's going on all the time. Let's start off with the aforementioned Dr. Shane Reti. I mean, gosh, that name leans so well to that kind of, that mocking back of him. And I just think about a health professional. You think about the legacy that you leave, and cancelling Smokefree 2025 is going to be a legacy that this Northland, massive issue with Māori and smoking in Northland, this Northland GP leaves behind him. Whew. So let's have a look at a couple of clips. Now, I'll say again, I kind of appreciate there's one he doesn't answer on how are they going to increase the wages for nurses, but you'll notice a difference, I think, Whānau, when you're listening to him. He answers the questions much more than, for example, a Christopher Luxon. So the first question we're going to look at, it's only a minute 20. What are you doing as the health minister to stop nurses from heading off to Australia? Let's have a look.
What are you doing to stop nurses go to Australia?
That's what I said.
So that's a challenge. And interestingly, the internationally qualified nurses, a large number of them actually move on to Australia, even though we've had a large number of IQNs come in this last quarter.
Yeah, they arrive here and then they immediately register in Aussie, right?
Yeah, some don't even come here. They register from the UK and don't actually set foot in New Zealand. They go straight there.
So what do you do to stop that?
I've been talking with the Nursing Council about that, and that's a challenge, how we're a stepping stone to Australia. They are the internationally qualified nurses. Maybe our greater attention should should be for our domestic nurses, where we've all had investment in them, and they're the ones who are looking to move to Australia.
So how do you
offshore.
keep them here?
So that's a feature of retention. Retention has two parts to it. It has a wages and salary part, and it has a terms and conditions part.
Now, that's an answer. He actually gave the answer. You know, there's the conditions and there's the pay. Now, he doesn't quite go in depth enough about the pay, but like I said, Clint, we'll keep watching for another 40 seconds. So he was giving answers. It was quite refreshing. Didn't mean I like the answers, but he was giving them. So interesting.
Terms and conditions are things like a scope extension, feeling valued in your job, a career over a lifetime. Those are some CCDM, those are some of the terms and conditions. And then, of course, wages and salary, pay equity and pay parity, of course, is a feature of
So what are you improving?
We're improving all of these areas because what
You're improving pay?
I'm not going to discuss specific pay
Yeah.
negotiations,
You said
but
you're
what I will say
improving
is
all of
that
these areas.
wages have increased for nurses by 14% over the recent past. Still not comparable with Australia, I understand that, but that has already improved. We've got more nurse practitioners funded to come into the workplace as well.
Right.
Scope extension.
So there you go. Now, a couple of things there. Of course, nurses' wages have increased by 14% over recent times. Just remind me. Just remind me who. So that means who's responsible for those increases? Who is? So he's selling this point about with the increase that has gone like it's a good thing, but I can't remember who was the one that. Oh, it was Labor, wasn't it? It was Labor. So the Labor that apparently ruined the health system. He's now saying, well, you know, wages have gone up 14% over recent times, but you know. Other than not getting into the finer details about saying whether there's going to be a 20% pay, he answered the questions much to the shock of many people, Clint.
Yeah, well, I mean, he did. And, you know, he actually gave, like, proper analysis of what drives what people to stay or leave New Zealand, wages and conditions. You know, not these airy-fairy ideas that you'll hear from a lot of right-wing politicians because they don't want to admit that it's wages. It's fundamentally what drives people overseas. But having admitted that fundamentally it's wages and conditions, he can't say, and we're going to improve wages and conditions because every spare cent that the government can find is going into tax cuts. So he knows what the problem is, but he can't afford to fix it because it's all going on tax.
And this is what we noticed last week. What we finally realised, I guess it's so blatantly obvious that what's happening in this government is they are identifying the problem, but then they either won't or can't do anything to solve it. So they say the first half of the sentence and not the second half. I mean, Seymour's perfect. He's identifying lots of issues that are actually issues, but he's offering no solutions at all. And you know, he said paying conditions and being silly. You know, if nurses were paid $1 million a year, we'd have all New Zealand nurses in New Zealand and every international nurse wanted to come here. If we were paying them $1 a year, we'd have none. The question is, where is that line between those two numbers to keep them here rather than going to Australia? And it's probably 20, 30 grand more a year.
Yeah. It's not magic, eh? People want to have a good wage, and it's hard to sit here and go, why don't I go across the ditch? It's just across the ditch. It's just Aussie. It's pretty hard to argue. I'll stay here and earn less money. Thanks.
Yeah, and the same was being said last week for the police. And what did they say? A 6-year social worker earned $22,000 more per annum than a 6-year police officer. When you hear those kind of numbers, you know, I mean, we were taking the piss a bit last week, Clint, going, well, that's easy. You just reduce the social workers by $22,000 and then you've got parity. Yay. But, you know, obviously taking the piss. But, yeah, I mean, the answer is money. The answer is money. Because everything flows from that. Whether it's I have to move home with mum and dad, even though I'm a police officer, because I don't have enough money. That's the answer for everything. I'm sorry.
I did a little bit of maths on the back of an envelope the other day. That $2.9 billion over 4 years for the landlords. That's $15,000 per teacher, nurse, doctor, policeman, defence force member. They could all get $15,000 over 4 years, rather than the landlords getting the money. You know, that's how much it is. Yeah. 200,000 in the wider public sector, and they could each get $15,000. But no, got to go to landlords.
Wow.
You know?
Yeah, you go much deeper. We just looked at 800 million. We thought, what could that be given to police officers? And it was a lot more, but that's even better. So fantastic. Oh, good numbers. Hey, let's have a look at the next part of this conversation. Well, it's not the next part, but it's the part at the end of the conversation when Jack was talking to Dr. Shane Reti about cigarettes. And the conversation starts with basically Jack just saying bluntly, how many lives would cancelling the smoke-free legislation lose, or how many would have been saved? And again, he gives an answer. I mean, this has been asked of other ministers and they've diverted away from it, but he gives an answer. Now, it's a horrific answer, and I think when he gets asked about how were you going to drive that number down, that's a stupid answer, but he gives an answer. And it's just interesting to see, especially a national politician choosing to engage somewhat honestly with the interviewer rather than playing that talking points game. So, yeah, let's have a look. It starts off talking about how many lives would the smoke-free legislation have saved.
As someone who has given his life to bettering the health of his community, how many lives would the smoke-free legislation have saved?
So, look, I've seen numbers of 4,000 to 8,000 is what I've seen reported. In the...
So, see? Answer. Just like that. Gives an answer. It's actually disgusting that he says it so easily and slightly refreshing at the same time that an answer has been given. It's you know, he's putting it out there.
Media as numbers that the smoke-free legislation may have saved. But what we've also said is, look, the smoke-free rates are coming down from 8.6 to 6.8, one of the biggest gaps we've ever had, and we remain committed to driving them down. That's the context for the smoke-free legislation.
Okay, so you remain committed to driving them down. How will you drive them down?
Oh, those are pieces of work that are still in front of committees that I can't discuss here, but looking forward to bringing that forward.
So
even his non-answers are better than Luxon's non-answers, because he's basically given a reason why he wouldn't answer. Now, whether that's fair or not, I don't know. But you can kind of sit there and go, oh, yeah, it's in front of a committee. You know, can't really do much about that. It's behind those walls. What do you think, Clint, so far?
Yeah, I mean, it is fair enough, because you have these situations in government where you are working on something, but because it hasn't gone and got the tick off from cabinet, you're not allowed to talk about it publicly. And if you do, you'll have the Prime Minister's office yelling at you. So there is some fairness there, but it still reminds me of the kind of magical thinking that they've got around climate change as well. We're going to repeal every climate change policy, but we're still committed to the targets. And it's the same thing here. You know, they're always, when they sign out targets, they just never want to actually do anything about it. You know,
and
what
this
did
is
the Saints say?
This is a bit the same as we said a second ago. It's the identifying the issue, but not having a solution. So they've cancelled, and the reason for this is, stay with me, whānau, the issue they've identified with cancelling smoke-free is we don't have enough revenue to pay off landlords what we need to. So that is their issue. So they've solved that issue by cancelling smoke-free 2025 and keep funding their tax cuts off the backs of primarily lower socioeconomic people dying from cancer. And then they don't have a solution for how they're going to drive those numbers of smokers down. So again, issue, no solution, issue, no solution.
And they kind of say, oh, well, it's okay because smoking rates are falling anyway. But there's a difference between if they're falling faster or slower. There's lives at stake. You know, the fact that they're saying we're going to raise more money means they're going to sell more cigarettes. And it works out about 1 billion more cigarettes will be sold over 4 or 5 years. And you know, you can that's there is that rough calculus that 1 billion cigarettes equals about 8,000 lives.
Yeah, and I think they said 8,000, wasn't it, by 2050 or something was going to cost 8,000 more New Zealanders, dead New Zealanders. And at the same time, even if you just want to forget about that, what the analysis has also been to do with what those dead New Zealanders would have generated in tax take as well, makes this a losing combination all around. But it solves the immediate problem of we don't have enough revenue for today's tax cuts, even though even long term, it's even a financial, bad decision long term as well. All right, we'll give us a couple more ticks.
So the previous smoke-free legislation was set to come into force in July. Will your work be done by then?
We're looking to certainly have parts of the legislation that will be our solutions, our alternative solutions, up for discussion before then.
So as you mentioned, the modelling for the smoke-free legislation indicated that between 4,000 and 8,000 lives would be saved. Will your tobacco policy save more or fewer lives?
If we continue to drive down the smoking rates, the expectation would be yes, by definition.
And just make this clear, Whānau, as well. The driving down smoking rates is not a national policy. That is a current trend. So if we continue, what he's saying is if the current trend continues that we've seen over the last several years, then yes, we will. It's not that national or the NACT NZ government will do anything new to drive that down. It's the current trend, and I think we did that when we drew where the line would come down to about the same. And it's something like 2060. It's some ridiculous number away, and for that subsequent 25, 35 years, there's all the dead New Zealanders. Do you want to say anything yet, Clint, or should we play to the end of this?
No, go ahead.
Okay, I'll try my best not to interrupt.
Understand that you will be yes to what?
Yes to reducing rates.
No. The question was more or fewer.
Oh, we would need to model that.
Yeah. So you're telling me that you're working on smoking legislation that ultimately may save fewer lives, according to modelling, than the previous laws that were in place.
Oh, look, I need to see that modelling myself. That's not actually in my purview. What I've committed to is to continue to drive down the smoking rates.
This is an absolutely vital point.
And what's also important is that this is a collective cabinet decision. Just before you say, Shane, this is a you decision, this is a collective cabinet decision.
I understand. This is an absolutely vital point. I mean, given your expertise in this space, given your lifetime of work seeking to better the health of your communities, I want to be totally clear. Will the smoke-free work that you put in place, having scrapped the previous smoke-free legislation, save more or fewer lives than the previous legislation was modelled to save?
So that will need to be modelled on the proposals that we're bringing forward, and we remain committed to driving down those smoking rates. Very committed.
Will you support it if your modelling suggests that your smoke-free work will save fewer lives than the previous?
That's a hypothetical. I would need to see that first of all to make that.
Okay, bad answer. Because you were saying, if the modelling shows you that it's fewer, will you still support it? There's a bad answer, Clint. Are we agreeing that that's a bad answer?
All questions about the future are hypotheticals.
Yeah.
The politicians do that because there's a rule in Parliament in question time that you don't have to answer about hypotheticals, and then they try to run the same rules in these questions, and it doesn't apply. Of course,
Jack's got one more interesting question about the Associate Health Minister, which we'll play.
That sort of decision.
It's not a hypothetical. This is
completely hypothetical. We remain committed to driving down smoking rates. We've had one of the biggest drops without that.
I understand you're committed to it, but I'm asking whether or not yours is going to save more or fewer lives. To the best of your knowledge, has your Associate Health Minister had any contact with tobacco lobbyists?
I believe she has said no, so not to the best of my knowledge.
There you go. And that is the interview. So, yeah, he didn't answer towards the end. And as you were saying, I think he answered more than many, and like we'll give him some credit for that. But this idea of saying it is a hypothetical, like you say, any question in the future is a hypothetical, but it's the hypothetical is set in front of you, so you can answer based on that hypothetical. Should your legislation lead to fewer New Zealanders breathing, more New Zealanders dying, will you still support it? No, I'm not going to answer that. It's hypothetical. It's like, well, there was pretty good barriers around that hypothetical for a yes or a no, Clint.
Yeah, and it's the whole logic of what you're doing, right? Like, if your alternative is result in more Kiwis dying, then it's immoral. Because you've rolled back the laws that were going to be more effective as a tax grab, so that you could then fund tax cuts for landlords. And so, yeah, the whole morality of what you're doing falls down if your alternatives aren't better. So, yeah, it matters hugely.
Yeah.
But I look at Reti's face, and I have mixed feelings about this. I have some sympathy because he's clearly uncomfortable with the truth of what he's discussing here. And when he says it's collective cabinet responsibility, what he's saying is, I'm a member of cabinet. I have to say in public that I back this. That's the rules.
Right.
Of course, he doesn't have to be. No one's making him be a member of cabinet. He could quit if he really felt badly about it. And so I have this double feeling about this. He clearly doesn't like that the smoking laws have been rolled back, but he hasn't had the moral strength to go, I'm not going to put my name to it. I actually think that if he had stood up in cabinet and said, I'm the health minister, I'm, Māori GP from the far north who's seen, dozens, maybe hundreds of lung cancer cases in my time, and I'm not going to back this policy, and I'll cross the floor, I'll leave the party over it, then I don't think it would have happened. I think Blacks would have backed out. But, well, if he cares, then he should have risked it. What's the worst that happens? He goes back to being a GP. Stand for something, and because this isn't small beer, this is thousands of lives. You're a GP. You've come to Parliament to improve the health system, and your first action is thousands of lives.
It is interesting to think. I think about BZP party pills that were out there, and they were getting used by young people, and they got them banned, and they weren't killing thousands and thousands of people. And if you bought in some kind of new drug that was legal, that was killing half of its users, and costing the country a shit ton in medical care as well, it would never get through. So finally, our government had this absolutely world-leading legislation that was lauded by everyone, saying, look what these guys have done to get rid of that. And this current government has gone, you know what? Our tax on international buyers is not going to go through because of Mr. Peters. We need to find the revenue elsewhere. Anything goes. Anything goes.
And rush through under urgency with no consultation. And Chris Bishop saying, well, it was in somebody's manifesto, buried down in a filing cabinet that no one ever read, so we don't need to consult. The happy to sign over thousands of lives for that for the tax revenue to pay for those tax cuts at the end of the day. And these are the big decisions that governments make, and you do deal in lives when you make decisions about this safety investment on the roads. There's lives in your hand, but few of them are dealing with thousands of lives, and for one just to get some tax revenue. Shocking.
It doesn't. I mean, I don't like the American litigious system, but it does make me think, if you're the family of someone who in 10 years dies from lung cancer due to smoking, what recourse do you have against these individuals who are making decisions leading to that outcome? Now, I know some people are going to go, well, they're allowed to smoke, they could give up if they want to. As someone who has had and probably continues on some level addiction issues, it's not quite as simple as that. It's just not quite as simple as, sweet as, we won't do it anymore. Some people can do that, most people can't.
Yeah, exactly. And they know as much. That's why the modelling said it would have resulted in a billion fewer cigarettes being smoked. It would have resulted in all these things because the nicotine being cut and access being cut.
Yeah, that was other point that was made. They could have kept some of those things in place, like the taking nicotine out of cigarettes, but they just no. We said this lots of times, Clint. The two groups that seem to be happiest. Imagine getting to the end of your 100 days and going, big tobacco and big oil, and we're thinking about around the EV stuff, are the two groups that you've made happier than anybody else in your first 100 days. Imagine that legacy. What kind of superhero villain do you need to be to get to the end of your 100 days and be getting high five from the tobacco companies and big oil, And
the mega landlords.
Yeah, and the mega landlords.
Did you see Paul Goldsmith asked, how do you think 100 days is going at WOMAD, and got booed? Because that's how it's approached. They think it's, they think, hey, we've ticked off the boxes that we set for ourselves. Everyone should be praising us. But people can see the different, just because you set yourselves some goals and achieve them doesn't mean they're good goals.
Speaking of 100 days, 100 years, he speaks about World War II like he was in his mid-20s when it happened, because he talks about, when I saw it, he doesn't quite say that, but it sounds like he was personally, maybe he was old Methuselah here. We've got to have a look at this. This is obviously the bigger, you know what, if people out there who are a supporter of this dude think that Joe Biden is too old to be president, who's turning, it's 80 this year, I believe. This dude.
Yeah.
This dude. So just P's and Q's. Anyway, he decided to evoke, like every seasoned debater does, Nazi Germany when talking about New Zealand policy. This is on with the AM show. This was a strange conversation. And I think, to be fair, that the delay between the videos might have contributed a little bit to it. But, as soon as you say Winston Peters, you don't need any other excuse for a strange interview. Let's be honest about that. I know I've said this before, Clint. He is fun to interview, but there's not a lot of substance there anymore. He's lost a step, certainly. So let's start this conversation on the AM show. Now, I'm not playing the bit that he talked about before because he's making this case today that the reason he made a comparison about Nazi Germany was because of something that Waititi said about the DNA of Māori. So that's been left off. He does pick up on it, but I just wanted you to know what's been said in the last couple of minutes because we're not going to watch the whole thing. We're just going to watch about 90 seconds of it right now. Talking to Lloyd this morning about the comments about comparing co-governance to Nazi Germany.
Why did you pin this on Labour, though? Why didn't you say that this was a Te Pāti Māori thing if that's what was said at the time?
Because that's the pathway down which they went. The whole thing about Three Waters was that Māori would own the water of our country, something that's a gift from heaven. All of Polynesian, all of Māoridom knows it's a gift from heaven to be shared with everybody. It's an ugly face of modern radical Māoridism, Māori elitism, and the mass majority of Māori hate this. They know it's not them. And all I'm saying is we need a reality check here.
Yeah, and I get the point that you're making because that's the point you're making about co-governance. But bringing the Holocaust into it, do you understand that that's inappropriate? And the Holocaust Centre of New Zealand said you shouldn't be throwing words like that and comparisons like that around willy-nilly.
You can rush off like the mainstream media after a year when this man made those racist comments.
This is the other thing Winston's doing more and more and more. And I'm actually going to play a short clip as well from breakfast where one of the other NZ First MPs was on. Sorry. Don't know his name. Why would you? Winston First. But the double down, triple down, quadruple down on media, and I've written down in my notes where he says you've done this. And when he says you, he means every single part of media, every single journalist. I mean, I would say you to Lloyd if Lloyd had done something. But he says you've done this and you've done that. Yeah, sorry, Clint?
It's pretending that the media, like the media party, you hear that phrase thrown around, as if the media is organised, unitary outfit that have a single agenda. We can go into media theory, but they certainly at this level they're not like a political party. But that's how he frames it.
Yeah. So we'll get there is many rants coming from Mr. Peters, but here's just one of them.
Waititi, when you did nothing. And you can rush off to the people from the Jewish community and say, what do you think of this? But my question is, how did you phrase the question? Did you mention Waititi's statement last year? Did you ask them what that meant back in Germany when it all started? No, you didn't. So I'm not being put off by that sort of behaviour from you guys at all.
Well, it's not from us. It's it's from the New Zealand Holocaust Centre.
Oh, no, but you rushed off to see them. But did you tell them what and why I said it? Did you point out to him that Waititi...
I don't think that's true, by the way. I think the Holocaust Centre put out an independent statement. I'm not 100% on that, but I don't think you, the media, rushed off and knocked on their door and was like, hey, give us a statement because he says it's like Nazi Germany. I think they had an independent
that's right.
PR bit come out.
You said that they were superior to everybody else in this country? No, you didn't. So
no, but you didn't even mention that in your speech, though.
Yeah.
Mention what?
The specific example you've given me for the reason that you made the comments.
Yes, I did. I mentioned what he said. I said that this comment about superior DNA, and I know where that began. That sort of thinking, and know where what the consequences of it are if they're unchecked, and they were by the mainstream media unchecked until I mentioned it the other day.
And so then he becomes the saviour of the media because obviously if he hadn't have done it, the media would go downhill in a heartbeat. I'd love to get your thoughts on that first. But I think that's pretty much all we're going to play of Winston. The others, some response to him, but actually there might be the original quote as well, but that's the start of the conversation with Winston, basically blaming everyone but himself for the words that come out of his mouth.
Well, the funny thing, I went and actually read the text of the speech, which is up on News Hub, and it's obviously the the text that they've been given from New Zealand First, not a transcript, because the stuff about Nazi Germany isn't in there. He ad-libbed that.
He ad-libbed it, yeah.
and that's why it's so incongruous. And it's quite funny that he kind of does do this, Winston. Like, his speech is pretty long and rambling, but whatever his message was meant to be has been totally sidelined by these Nazi comments, which everyone knows are ridiculous. And then saying it's about he's reacting to some comments that the Māori Party co-leader made at some point that no one's heard of.
And blaming Labour for it. That's the other thing.
Something that's bedeviled Peters over a very long political career is that he tends to get distracted into fights that no one else quite understands. And it'd be a lot better if he focused on the issues that his supporters actually care about.
Were you working with Jacinda Ardern when they formed that government and he was Deputy Prime Minister? Were you around then? Have you got any insights as to who he is as a person?
Yeah. So I was doing the kind of the policy strategy and stuff heading into the 2017 election. I wasn't part of the negotiations, but was sort of watching that from the outside. And then I was ministerial advisor for Phil Twyford for a year or so in government, and dealt with Winston in his office a few times. He is very experienced, and he kind of gave Twyford a few lessons in not believing everything the officials are telling you, which is something that Phil learned to his regret. But he is very experienced. He is very wily. But he's also self-sabotaging with things like this. He's a complex figure, I guess is the best way to put it. And it's like his politics, some of it, even in the speech on the weekend, he was talking about we've fallen behind Australia on wages because we had the neoliberal revolution undermined wages and conditions here, and that's been terrible, which is all true. But then you look at his voting record. He just repealed FPAs. So, a man of contradictions.
So New Zealand First MP Andy Foster, who was obviously the mayor of, I'm saying obviously like I knew this, I did know this, but I'd forgotten, who was the mayor of Wellington, was on the other channel. Don't know if it was while Winston was going on. Probably not, because Winston probably needs to see exactly what's going on with all of his MPs. So it might have been at a slightly different time. And Andy was asked by, I think we're going to be looking at Anna Burns-Francis, were Winston Peters' comments offensive? Let's pick it up there. And it's around about talking about everything. The media is completely responsible for all of these things. No dribble or shit that drops out of Winston Peters' mouth is his fault. It's all the media's fault. I don't know.
Andy, I'll start with you. Were Winston Peters' comments offensive?
Look, I think take the speech as a whole. What he was saying is that we are in a bit of a mess as a country. Labor's left us.
That's not what he said, though, Andy. That's not what he said.
He spoke for an hour or so. So he said a lot of things. And the key focus was that our country is in a mess. We've been handed an economy which is performing poorly. We've been handed services which are performing poorly, and also that we're more divided than ever. And that was the context for those particular comments. That.
Yeah, no shit, chief divider. I mean, I'll tell you something. To tangent a little bit, I had a conversation with someone in the weekend who's got a close personal friend of theirs who thinks Winston is bringing Māori together. Like, that's their opinion. They're like, Winston Peters is the man to bring Māori together. And I'm just like, you okay. It would be nice to live in that metaverse. I'm not quite sure how that works, but some people see it that way.
Maybe in the 1990s for a little bit.
Yeah. And I talk about what it typically is. It's like, the brother or the friend of my friend, the enemy of my enemy is my enemy. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. Enemy of my enemy is my friend. There's that thing that if you can align with someone who seems to be saying what you already believe, then they're right and they're the people. So for all of these people who are thinking, bloody Maori, they're getting too much and that's not what they deserve, if they hear it from Winston, then they go, well, Winston's trying to bring them all together. He's right, only because he is confirming their bias. Confirmation bias is there already, and that's why he's, strangely enough, quite attractive to a whole lot of old white people. Really strange.
Yeah, absolutely. I like what Andy's response there of, look at the whole speech. In other words, yeah, what he said about Nazi Germany is indefensible, and I'm not going to try to defend it. Look at all the rest of the speech. Sorry,
I think that point gets made because I think one of them makes the point that, all the attention's being taken away because of this one sentence. And I think the response is, well, he shouldn't have put that one sentence in, should he? And then it wouldn't be getting taken away from it. So it's chicken or egg. All right, we'll keep going.
Labor did put us in a position where different people were treated differently because of their race.
That's not Nazi Germany, though. That's so far away from what happened in Nazi Germany and the Holocaust.
With the greatest respect, Anna, this is pretty normal media behaviour. You focus on one sentence and not on the overall context of what was being said.
I mean, I didn't say it. The Deputy Prime Minister, one of the leaders of this country, compared co-governance to the mass murder of 6 million people.
No. What he said was the distinction is about people being treated differently because of their race.
Yeah.
But he didn't say it that way, did he? He invoked some language that the Holocaust Centre has said is offensive to the memory of those who died, to those who survived the Holocaust, and to start throwing around terms like that is willy-nilly. We have seen society grow increasingly numb to inflammatory comments. What we saw today was simply an example of the sort of breakdown of society. They're offended.
Anna, you're absolutely right. We have seen things like genocide being thrown around right, left and centre as well, which is also offensive to the Jewish community.
So does Winston Peters owe an apology then? If the comments can be offensive to the Jewish community, should he owe them an apology?
I think what you need to do is to sit down and take the comments as a whole. And that is what the media are not doing.
It's not us, Andy. The Holocaust Centre literally says they are offensive.
Anna, it is you. Sorry.
I mean, I'm not a member of the Holocaust Centre. I'm not a spokesperson for them.
No, but it is the media who are focused on one line out of an hour-long speech.
Yeah. So do you want to get a heads up that Winston's direction of attacking the media in a Trumpian style is flowing through his MPs? It's right there, Clint.
Yeah. And that is just like, how quickly can I get this interview over? Yeah. Well, all they can do is try to deflect with this rubbish about look at the whole speech and it's your fault. It's your fault for quoting the leader when he said that thing.
How dare you use his words against him? Don't you do that. What are you doing?
How dare you ask me what I meant when I said what I said?
Yeah. I do have a question for you, though. The question I wanted to ask you, because, again, having been in those halls occasionally, how long is a new government, in your opinion, allowed to keep blaming the old government? Like, when does the statutes of limitation end? Like, if they're being honest, we know that they're not being honest about tax take, because what they're doing at the moment is they're saying the way Labor left their books are making it hard for us to do X. And the truth is, it's hard for you to do X because your projected revenue is so much less than you thought it would be or that you promised it would be. But how long do you think it's reasonable? Like, if you were speaking to a leader, and at what point would you kind of go, hey, I think it's a bit late now to be blaming the opposition when they were in government? What do you reckon is fair?
I mean, in honesty, government does take years to turn around if that's what you're trying to do. Yep. The issue more here is that they're all claiming that it was in an amorphous way, things were left badly. Although then you hear Shane Reti admit that Labor put up nurses' wages by a lot, and that's the issue of the nurses' wages.
But he didn't quite do that, did he? He didn't quite say Labor did it. He said over subsequent years or previous years or whatever. He didn't quite evoke the word Labor, which would have been a disaster anyway.
Yeah. But it's when we were setting up the government build program, building all the state houses and stuff, that was a machine that took years to get building up, right? Like if you want more doctors and nurses, they take years to train. So there are things that do, if you want to build a road, years. It genuinely does take a lot of time. But I'm not seeing anything that this government is saying, look, here's our plan to fix health. And it is going to take some time because it's a big program to do X or Y. So they're sort of stuck blaming the last government, but not offering the solution. Yeah, and that's where I think that's why people get sick of it, and that's where that I think actually is probably the time that people get sick of it is when you're still blaming the other guys, but you don't have an alternative, and so that's obviously a movable piece, but they're hitting that wall pretty quickly.
Yeah, all right. Now, I want to play, this is just a 30-second clip, right? But this is the next question that was asked of the Green MP who was on there as well, Ricardo Menendez-March, because he brings up a beautiful point about his old mate Andy when it comes to co-governance. And I just wanted that, if it hasn't been seen by people. You know, sometimes what we like doing, Clint, here is sort of giving people ammunition or informing them so they can also know. So if this conversation comes up tomorrow or this evening or whatever about Winston Peters and co-governance, just remember this about Mr. Andy Foster, isn't it?
There's two things here. One of them is when Andy was mayor of Wellington, he actually supported co-governance policies when he was mayor. So I think there's a bit of hypocrisy here. But the second part is, of course, these comments are not appropriate. And for a politician who loves to blame the left of things like virtue signaling, that is one speech that was full of dog whistles and very little substance on how we address things like the rising cost of living, climate change, and people not having access to healthcare.
There you go. I just wanted to give you a little counterpoint there. And, you know, not only are you having to defend your leader for your leader's words, but why are you having a problem now with co-governance when you're all for it? As mayor, perhaps, Clint.
Yeah, well, when he was mayor, he was really in the driver's seat. He had to make those decisions. And, you know, government isn't doing co-governance out of the goodness of its heart. It's doing it because it's bound to by the treaty, and if it doesn't, it'll find itself in general treaty breaches for decades to come. And so when he was mayor, he had to deal with it, but now he's a backbench MP and he can pretend it's not real.
Not just the treaty obligations as well. I haven't got the story with me, but I saw a new one that came up today talking about the cost of New Zealand's water infrastructure and how many billions that's going to be. And what we're continually telling people, you guys know this, what we keep saying to people is, under a centralised government version of Three Waters, Gore, our content point is always Gore, Clint, because they were something like $30 million under, not enough ratepayers to pay for it. And also, there's no magic barrier between Dunedin where we are and Gore. You know, the bad water issues from there flow up to other places, you know, only as strong as my weakest link. Gore's not going to be able to pay for that without about a $5,000 rate increase. So all these stories that are coming out now, all the people who are complaining about their rates, it's because your mayors have done you a disservice by not being honest with you about necessities, and then places like Groundswell have done you more of a disservice, convincing you that Three Waters was about the bloody Maoris owning water. And this is the downstream, pardon the pun, effect of it, Clint.
Yeah. Well, do you remember when Kieran McNulty was put in charge of it and he went away and, he, you know, to be fair to him, he went around all the councils, had a talk to them and came back with a slightly revised plan. But he came out to the media and he said, and I love the way Kieran talks, he goes, look, here's the guts of it. We need to spend $180 billion on fixing the pipes. No one wants to spend that money, and the councils can't afford to. So look, here's the solution. It's the only viable path. And he's right. And, you know, Labour lost the politics on Three Waters, and
sure.
But they were right on the substance. And now we've got this situation where councils up and down the country can't afford to pay for their pipes. And, you know, the fear is, well, the fear for the left, probably the plan for the right, is it's going to lead to privatisation. Yeah. Remember the stink that the right kicked up when Labour went to entrench public ownership of these water services. You know, that so right now, any council up and down the country can turn around and sell its pipes tomorrow to a private owner. And we only need to look to the UK, where Scotland has the model that Labour wanted to put in, and England sold theirs off, and the Scots pay about a third as much and have better water. And that's a fear that we're going down the English path when we nearly have the Scottish one.
The last part of this conversation is, of course, the man who we refer to as our feckless leader, being led around by the nose by his Deputy Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister in waiting. When asked about the comments, he didn't say what he often says, which is, I haven't seen those comments. He did say, though, I haven't spoken to him yet. This is what the Prime Minister said about Winston Peter's comments today.
Have you spoken to Winston Peters about the comments he made yesterday about Nazi Germany?
No, I haven't had a chance to do so, but I do. We talk regularly, and I plan to talk to him about it.
The Prime Minister wants some decorum back.
Calling on people from all political parties to maintain the civility in our politics, and I don't think extreme language on either side from any particular party is actually helpful or necessary.
He employed some diplomatic language on Peters.
That's not what I would say. I don't think that is, those aren't the way that I would phrase it at all.
I think Christopher Luxon at the
yeah. It's about as close as he's ever got to sending any kind of reprimand towards those two people. I don't think that's how I would say it. What are your thoughts about his response?
Well, a wet bus ticket, eh? I mean, Winston's going to continue to do what he wants. Seymour's going to continue to do what he wants. And the interpersonal relationship between these guys was set back in the negotiations when you had Luxon going up and down the country trying to get Winston into a meeting. And as soon as Winston knew he had the whip hand, then he's kept it ever since. And, I haven't had the chance to talk to him. If these guys heard of cell phones, in reality, if you have a minister stuff up like that, you're waiting for the Prime Minister to be on the phone giving them a ballsing. And he chooses not to, because ultimately he needs Winston's votes. And he's chosen to take a weak approach to that rather than a strong one.
And as we've said before, David Seymour in particular is walking around and talking like he's got fuck you power over Christopher Luxon. He just doesn't care. Winston Peters has been acting more like a political operative up until this point. But Luxon has been just going, I'll do what I want, when I want, and because I'm sorry, I don't care what piece of paper was signed in that 5-star hotel. I think Winston in particular, but also Seymour, but not maybe Winston more likely, will blow that thing up in a heartbeat. In fact, Winston Peters today coming out saying he is not compromising on any of his pre-election promises, and he even acknowledges that there's like a $5 billion hole. But even with that $5 billion hole, he is not compromising on anything. So it's going to be a hell of a ride, Clint.
And in some ways, what got buried in this speech was actually that shot across the bow to Luxon saying, I don't have to support anything of your agenda that I don't want to. And I have veto power over your agenda. So you're going to have to give me what I want. And they all have veto power over each other, right? There's 3 of them. They need all 3 to do anything. But the interpersonal relationship between them has been set in such a way that it's Seymour and Peters calling the shots and Luxon pretending to be in charge.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said it before. I'm sure there's some cartoonists out there. I'm just waiting for the puppet masters, Seymour and Peters up the top, and the strings going down to Luxon in front of the podium. It's just exactly what it is. So from RNZ, I haven't preset this up, so I'll just have a quick read. Winston Peters signals he won't compromise on New Zealand's first election commitments. New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters has signalled he will not compromise on the rollout of his election commitments, despite warning the government is short billions of dollars. Meanwhile, Finance Minister Nicola Willis denies the $5.6 billion shortfall. So you've got Winston Peters, the Deputy Prime Minister, saying it is there, and you've got the Minister for Finance saying it isn't there, and she says she won't guarantee promised tax cuts will arrive in July until the policy has been discussed by Cabinet during his... And can I just say this again? What wanker does a State of the Nation speech as an opposition leader trying to mimic an American, State of the Union speech? It's so weird. But anyway, during his State of the Nation speech in Palmerston North on Sunday, Peters confirmed reports the government is short $5.6 billion to pay for all of its campaign commitments. So he's a cowboy. He's just like doing what he wants. I mean, he is demonstrating now, to his credit, his own fuck you power. Because Nicola Willis is going, no. And Winston's going, yeah, that's true. I don't care. Give me my shit.
I mean, I don't know why she's trying to deny it. The maths is simple. They put out a table of here's how we pay for our promises. And it's turned out that the taxes they hope to raise, either they're not doing or they raise a fraction of what they estimated would. And the costs have blown out there's no magic here. You just add up the numbers, and there's this giant asshole. And you know, logically, you'd then reassess your tax package, and that's actually what Peters is saying, is we might not be able to deliver the tax package.
And here's the thing:
I've got my commitments.
Here's the thing for Mr. Peters, and there's been a couple of times where Mr. Luxon has talked about, you know, I'll check in with the Deputy Prime Minister. You don't tell Winston what to do. Like, he has a long memory and he holds grudges. So the question's going to come by reporters to Nicola Willis, so you're saying Winston Peters is wrong. She won't be able to say, yes, he's wrong. They'll do this whole, well, different people say different things, because if they embarrass Winston, they will get the wrath of it. It just, they don't have the ability to do that, to basically say he's wrong. It won't work for them. It just won't work.
She'll make the same kind of excuse she did there of, you'll see the numbers when they're released in the budget.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's always some, like I said before, there's some fairness to her saying, look, I can't tell you what the tax package is going to be because it hasn't been through cabinet yet and it'll be in the budget. That's fair, but her and Luxon have state, they've said they'll resign if they don't deliver income tax cuts. So, you know, they should be able to say, yes, there will be income tax cuts. Yeah. Peters is casting doubt on that.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let's just say this was a super chat from the previous conversation, but Dr. Reti, I was only following orders from JK, $2 super chat. Thank you for that, sir. Peter has a $5 super chat, says Winston and Winstonettes are like internet trolls loving the reaction. It's important to loudly reject this to make potential supporters have a rethink. Okay, having a rethink is something we're going to talk about next, actually, with the Greens as well. And finally, from Lurchify, thanks for the $5. What are the odds of another increase to GST? Sure, it's a rumour, but their fiscal trap is tight, and they've done it before. What do you think about that, Clint? Chances of raising GST?
I'm pretty sure I saw Willis rule it out explicitly, but there's always ways and ways, right? Like, nobody was expecting Simeon Brown to come out and say, I'm chucking another $50 on your rego, which equates to a significant tax hike. You know, $100 is it's like having an extra 5 or 7 cents on tax on your petrol. So you know, there's always ways that they can raise more revenue that we might not think of. That she's ruled out GST, but I wouldn't rule out something else.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's move on to the last story of the day. And also, it was one that I think dropped on Friday, so we missed it, of course, till today. I'm not going to play this story, but just to give a bit of a heads up on it, Greens must really review crisis management, says Dunedin-ite Gareth Hughes. He's living in the middle of the Dunedin Harbour at the moment, looking after a dock property. Former Green MP says party would need to really review how they're approaching crises as its vetting process is scrutinised. Now, we know what the situation is. We've got Green MP Darlene Tan, whose husband's company has been accused of, my word, abusing, taking advantage of migrant workers, paying cash, which is obviously illegal to someone who doesn't have a work, and they're talking about she had nothing to do with it, she had no input to it, etc., etc., etc. The only reason I've got this video is up because, Clint, what I want to ask you is, as a strategist who's been on the 9th floor, what does the party do for this? Because we don't pull punches here, we don't play favourites. If it's called a dirty stink bomb, we call it a dirty stink bomb, and this is shit house for the Greens, and it's a bad look. I just want to play you the timeline so everybody's aware of the situation. I think this might have been from Saturday's news.
On February 1st, Darlene Tanner told the party co-leaders of a formal complaint against her husband's business. A week later, a second complaint from another worker. This time it mentioned the MP. She was stood aside from her small business portfolio. And it was only yesterday, following media inquiries, she was suspended.
So there you go. That's all I really need to show, because everyone's been on top of this. So there was about give or take a 2-week period that the party knew between them finding out about some accusations with a tacit connection alleged to accusations including to a step down. I'd really be keen to I don't know if you've ever been in a kind of meeting where this sort of thing comes up, like a serious scandal, but you did work as a strategist in the Jacinda Ardern government. Give us your perspective from that side of it, because this is a terrible look. I mean, we've just had Gaura's Garhaman, pled guilty to shoplifting. We've now got this. I want to know what they should do about it, because I also want to know. I don't think this will affect the party faithful. I think they'll be solid, but for the Greens to be the next left-wing party, which is their ambition, right? It's absolutely their ambition. We had Chloe on last week telling us that. How do they go through these kinds of things, traverse through these sorts of things, and grow their base is what I'm thinking as well.
Yeah. I mean, this is when these terrible things do happen for any party. There's certainly questions about the background checking that the Greens have been doing. I think Gareth raised there the quality of that, but events happen. MPs misbehave, dark secrets from the past come out, and it's the test of leadership is what you do when that happens. And I think the problem for the Greens is that they knew enough that they stood it down from her portfolios, but didn't tell anyone, which is really weird because
so that was in the middle. So let's say it was about the end of week 1, they stood her aside. End of week 2, they withdrew her. So that was about the time frame.
Yeah, and I think you could think Barbara Kuriga, right? Like her husband and son were being prosecuted over maltreatment of animals on their farm.
Oh, that's right.
And she was stood down from the agricultural portfolio as a result, and you can see there's a conflict there. And it was alleged that she'd been writing to officials and pressuring them over this case. So it was right that she was stood down, and similar logic that Darling Tana had a portfolio that overlapped with the substance of their allegation, and then especially when she was named personally, it was right to stand it down. But there was no reason not to make it public then, and that's when it starts to look bad. You in these crises, you want to get all the information that you can, and there'll be sometimes privacy limitations, legal privacy limitations. You want to get all the information you can out to the public as soon as possible, so that you don't have a rolling maw of stories and revelations.
Yeah.
And sometimes that happens because you've trusted an MP. They've told you, no, this is all that's there. And then it does turn out there's more. So you have to be pretty sure of yourself and try and get all the information you can. But this is weirdly like the Gorries thing, in that they tried to sort of keep it under the carpet. It mystifies me that they took that approach.
What about when it's an accusation? Like, it's a serious accusation, but it's an accusation. Yeah. What do you do when, we all know how keen I should play it, shouldn't I? How keen Mr. Luxon is to make sure that nobody ever has even an appearance of a conflict of interest. But what do you do in a setting like that when there is an accusation, but you have to, should we do Mr. Luxon? Let's do Mr. Luxon. You have to let I don't know, the justice system take its course?
Well, for the very reason that it actually leads to perceptions of bias, rightly or wrongly. I just say to you, that's the perception. Whether that's real or not doesn't really matter.
Now, that perception doesn't come into account when you're giving money back to landlords and you own 5 rental properties. But, what do you do when you can't really make a decision because there's allegations? The person says, I'm innocent. What happens then?
Yeah, and it's a tough one, right? But when something is in a judicial process or semi-judicial process, and it relates to them and to their portfolio, I think the right thing is to stand them down from any related portfolios they have. You don't necessarily have to. You don't have to suspend them from a caucus or even take all their portfolios away from them, but you do have to be seen to say, look, given what's happening in your personal life right now, it's not appropriate for you to be speaking on behalf of the party on this issue because it's too close to where these allegations sit. Right. And I go back to the Barbara Kuriga, Andrew Little stood down Carmel Cepoloni as social development spokesperson when her mum was up on charges over some welfare fraud. That cases like this do happen, and it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a guilt, but it's just appropriate just to stand aside.
Yeah, I guess if you take it away from the political thing, and I don't know, I in my mind I always go to extreme examples because they seem easier. You know, if a teacher had an accusation of something, you know, terrible to do with a child, they'd be set aside on full pay just until that was sorted out. So it's, you know, if there seems to be a conflict with the accusation, that's a reasonable to stand them aside whilst going innocent until proven guilty. But for the sake of everybody's safety, standing them aside. Yeah. All right. Hey, mate, this has been fun tonight, Clint. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. Cheers for having me, mate. It was awesome.
No, young Chewy's off doing Fringe Festival duties, and so it's great that you jumped in and spent some time with us. Anything you want to leave the punters with?
Yeah. It was funny. I was seeing Gareth there talking about the Greens having mistakes, because I don't know if you know, back in the day I was Greens advisor, and we had a policy launch, and Gareth was fronting it. It was Russell Norman was the actual spokesperson, but he was off on a holiday, and so Gareth had to answer this question about whether we'd announced this electricity policy that was meant to lower electricity prices at the same time as the government was trying to sell the shares in the electricity companies, and Gareth wasn't really across the lines too much, and I'm as the advisor standing off camera, and he goes, "Hey Clint, did we mean to make the prices? Do we want to make the prices drop?" you should look at the video, the Hey Clint moment. It was Toba O'Brien, and that was my little cool claim to fame, me and Gareth. So that was a little crisis management moment. Gareth being embarrassed when it was ran on News Hub of Hey Clint.
I do remember the Hey Clint. And no, I didn't put the two and two together. Well, look, everyone's loved having you here. A whole bunch of people saying thanks for coming, Clint. It was awesomeness. Kiwi Skirt saying like and subscribe, because that's what Kiwi Skirt does. Good list. You know, lots of people just being doping on the conversations tonight. So cool, Banana. So good to have you here. And thanks everyone for joining us again tonight for another edition of Big Hairy News. We'll be back tomorrow night from 9 p.m. We'll do it all over again. For some reason, I think I stuffed up looking at the numbers tonight, I think they were a bit down, but that's why I was looking around at one stage, and it seems that I forgot to set up the Twitter feed. So I don't think we went out to Twitter tonight, and that's one of the reasons our numbers might be down for Twitter. But for you lovely YouTubers who are always with us, good to have you. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll be back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. for another edition. Thank you again, Clint. It's been amazing. And to all you guys who have been with us tonight, thank you for joining us, and we'll see you tomorrow night from 9.